Today in our 2017 Ford F250, we're going to take a look at and show you how to install the Firestone Ride-Rite Double convoluted air helper springs. These are designed for use on the rear axle. The part number is F2600. Now if you're looking for airbags for your F250, you've probably got a situation similar to this that you're trying to correct. As you can see, our customer today has a great big in-bed camper here, and it's causing him to have vehicle squat here in the rear end. You can see the back of the truck sag down. Now, in-bed campers are very notorious for this, but so are your fifth wheels and your goosenecks. Your larger utility trailers, if you haul heavy loads on a trailer, they all put weight on the rear of the vehicle. The basic effects of that are going to be overloading of the rear suspension system here. Our leaf springs build up a lot more friction than they do under normal use. Now this vehicle sag leads to a lot of negative effects on our vehicle's handling and overall performance. Basically, when we're putting this excess pressure on these rear leaf springs, they build up additional friction, which eventually leads to additional heat, and it can cause premature failure. Also, our suspension isn't in its optimal range here in the rear end, so as we're maneuvering side to side and turning, especially in a situation like this, we're going to experience a lot of body roll. Let's take a look up here at the front end and talk about some of the effects that overloading the rear has up there. Now when the rear of the vehicle sags, it takes weight off of our front end. Typically what we'll see is this fender well kind of raise up a little bit. Now that has several negative effects as well. To start with, you're going to be taking weight off of your front tires. When you do that, your steering response, your handling, and your braking, they're all going to have kind of a dull feel to them. It doesn't feel as responsive. And it also, by doing that, is going to change the suspension geometry. That can lead to some weird tire wear. You'll wear the outer edge a lot quicker than you will the inner. The front headlight beams are set level at the factory, or set so you can see. And when the rear of that truck goes down, those get pointed up slightly. And that kind of reduces the visibility ahead of you, which can lead to kind of a dangerous situation, especially when you're carrying more weight. Getting everything stopped safely can kind of be an issue. So let's take a look at the install process of those airbags and see how they're going to correct this for us. Now we're going to get some in-use footage of our truck with the camper in it, but before we install the airbags, as we do their side-to-side maneuvers, you'll see the body roll that we have in the truck side to side. Just from the excess strain we're putting on that suspension, you can see how much movement that we have. As we go through the bumps, you can see how abruptly our suspension's bouncing up and down. That transfers into a rougher ride in the truck, in our camper or trailer if we happen to be hauling something. Now, something I like to do before I begin the installation process is just make note of the measurements. Usually I just go to the inside of the fender well here, on the back and the front. That's going to set our target for us to get back to. Once we have the airbags installed, we'll put that camper back in and see what kind of air pressure we need to get everything leveled back out. In our case, this F250 is going to be about 41 inches to the inside of the wheel well here. In the front, we're at about 37.25. Now, when the camper was in the truck, we took measurements. The rear had sagged about 5 inches. It was all the way down to about 36 inches, and the front had come up by about 1/2 of an inch. So that's a pretty significant difference in our suspension. Let's go ahead and get the airbags installed, and we'll figure out how much PSI it's going to take to level everything back out. Now you can see what a big difference is made after our airbags have been installed. We've got the camper back in the truck, and by bringing the pressure up in those airbags, we were able to completely level it back out, right back to our factory specifications. So with that being done, of course, we're taking a lot of that excess weight off of that rear suspension system and allowing our airbags to make up for that, and our airbags to give that support. Now here in the front, those side effects we talked about when we're hauling something are completely negated now. We've got all that weight back down on the front end. Our tire alignment is going to be where it was. The suspension geometry is going to be returned. Our headlight angles are going to be back where we want them. So overall, the airbags have made a significant difference in both the ride handling characteristics and safe capabilities of our truck when towing. Our airbag kit has been designed to work with all of your factory components. So there's no modifications necessary. You can see our heavy-duty steel brackets here. They're going to use existing holes in our frame, so we won't have to drill anything, make any kind of modifications to the vehicle whatsoever. Something else you'll notice, and our customers have noticed based on the reviews and things that we take a look at, is that even when your truck is unloaded and we're operating our springs at the minimum pressure, our ride quality there is going to be improved as well. There's going to be less body roll side to side and overall sharper handling, which I think you're really going to enjoy. After our airbags have been installed, you'll notice an immediate difference there in the overload spring area. As we do our side to side maneuvering, you'll notice a lot less body roll. The airbags are helping to support that weight and keep our truck operating nice and level. As we go over our bumps with the airbags installed, you'll notice everything's much smoother. That's transferred right through to the cab. It feels much nicer in the vehicle when we're driving it, and the contents of our camper and trailer are going to be much safer. There's no drilling, no modifications of the vehicle required at this point. It even puts the jounce bumper back in. You can see it here. That's part of the mounting solution here on the bottom side of the frame. So not really changing anything on the vehicle, just adding that benefit of the air ride and leveling capabilities of the Firestone Ride-Rite suspension system. Here you can see our dual inflation valves. This is going to be really important with an in-bed camper setup like what we've got here. This allows us that side-to-side adjustment, adjusting each airbag independently to make sure we're not only level front to back, but side to side. It's really going to optimize the ride quality and the handling capabilities of our truck. Now, when comparing the Ride-Rite airbags to other manufacturers' airbags, there's one key difference that I'd like to point out to you. With this steel rolled crimp design in the Firestone airbag, we are actually able to perform your normal scheduled maintenance like your oil changes or your tire rotations with the axle hanging from the airbag. There are lighter duty bags on the market available, and there are heavier duty. Firestone makes a red label. The red labels would be considered more of an extreme duty situation, but for your standard typical situations, I think this is going to be what you're looking for. If you're getting into some situations where you have extreme loads in your truck, or if it's a daily situation, maybe going up to the red label with that commercial grade material might be a good option for you. Now, to begin our installation, we're going to start by removing the jounce bumpers from each side of the vehicle. We want a 15mm socket. We just need to remove the nut here and the one located behind it here. Now, we will want to hang on to our jounce bumper and our hardware for reinstallation later. Now we're going to begin the assembly process for what's going to be our driver's side bag. This is our bottom bracket, and this is a portion of our upper bracket. These are going to be the same on both of your air springs, but for your side brackets that attach to your upper bracket here, these are your frame brackets. For these, you're going to have 4 different ones. For your driver's side, you want to use the 5856 and 5857. For your passenger side, you're going to use the 5854 and 5855. We'll start just by setting our upper bracket down on top. You see our 2 studs line up with 2 holes pre-drilled in the bracket. Each one of those is going to get a 3/16 inch locking flange nut. And you'll want a 9/16 inch socket to run those down, then we can get them torqued. Now you've got a threaded hole. I'm going to take our 90-degree fitting and thread that down in there. And we'll thread that in far enough so that that red sealant is well within the threads of the airbag. Now I'm going to rotate that so that it's pointing towards the rear of the vehicle. This is going to be towards the outside, so that would be pointing towards the rear. Now we're going to grab our front upper bracket here. This is the 5/6. The 3 bolt holes line up with the 3 holes we can see right here. Now we can take our 3/8 1-inch long hex bolts. We're going to place those in from the airbag side through our frame bracket there. We have 1 in each hole. I'm just using these 2 to get us started. Now for the rear of our driver's side bag, we'll use the 5/8, 5/7. Let's get all three of those started. Now on our front bracket, we'll be able to tighten up all three bolts and get those torqued down. On the rear bracket, we're going to tighten up these two and torque them, and you'll want to leave this one loose for now. Leaving this loose allows us to get the larger bolt in here we're going to need in a few steps. Now we'll just rotate that assembly over. We're going to have our lower bracket that we'll put in position. We're going to place it on the threaded hole here on the bottom. We're going to be using a 3/16 inch flange bolt. And this will just have finger tight for now. We'll still want that adjustability in that lower bracket. Now we'll take care of the assembly of our driver's side. If you want to at this point, you go ahead, head to the passenger side and get it assembled. Just remember you're going to use those two different brackets here. Now we can position our airbag up in our frame. When we do, you see how that jounce bumper bracket, it lines up perfectly with the holes in our airbag. We're going to use the bracket underneath the airbag flange there and those factory nuts we removed to get it held up in position. Now we'll use our larger 5/8 diameter flange bolts, and we're going to use 4 washers. Our truck does not have the in-bed hitch. If you do have the in-bed hitch, you're going to use just 1 or 2 of these. Since we don't, we're using 4. Those are going to be in between our bracket and our frame. So we'll position those over the hole, bring our bolt through, and it's going to go through the hole that it lines up on there. We'll slide that through. We've got one in the back here and one right up there in the front. Now on each of those, we want to thread on our 5/8 flange nut, just hand tight for now. Now we'll snug down our jounce bumper nuts. And we'll torque those to factory specifications. Now we'll tighten and torque that lower bolt that we didn't on the upper bracket previously. Now you'll want to use a 15/16 wrench and socket. We'll tighten and torque our 5/8 bolts. Now we're going to check the positioning of our lower bracket here. So we'll start with the shim. You want to make sure you're picking the right shim for your application. We'll place that right up against the back of the spring pack. We're going to use our 5-inch carriage bolts. Bring one down through each side, through our shim. Check the front as well. Now the front's going to get the spacer shaped like this, with the holes to be facing up on that. That fits in front of the spring pack there, or the U-bolts for the spring pack. And there we're going to use our 6-inch carriage bolts. We're going to be the longer carriage bolts. Down through the square hole in the bracket, down through the hole in the spacer there. We want that to come on down. Do that on both sides. And we're going to adjust that lower bracket in or out, just depending on what you need, so that our carriage bolts are sitting flush up and down. And we're going to mark around that so we know its location. And then we want to tighten that bolt on down and get it torqued. Just mark it well so if it moves, you'll know it. All right, now that we've got our lower bracket torqued down, I'm going to take out the 5-inch U-bolts we used in the back here. We're going to replace those with the shorter 3-inch. And then on the front, we're going to replace the 6-inch with the 5s we just took out of the back. Now we'll place on our 1/2-inch spacers. We want the single hole to be towards the inside, the elongated towards the outside. The opening will be up. Now on that, we want to place one of our 3/8 flat washers and a nylon lock nut. And you see, since we have our overload springs, we're going directly underneath those. If you don't have the overload springs, you need to use those longer carriage bolts and go underneath your spring pack itself. Now we'll come up here to the front and do the same thing there. Now we want to tighten down our bolts. As you can see, there's not a lot of room in here to get in socket, so probably gonna have to do a lot of work with a wrench. And you want to be sure to follow your instructions for your torque specifications, which again, will be pretty hard to do with a torque wrench. We want to be sure that you've got enough pressure here holding everything together. Now we'll get our inflation valves put in our valve bracket. You can see you just want to place a flat washer on it after you take the nut off. Place that through. You're going to place on another flat washer. And then also the nut we took off. Then you'll just need a 1/2 inch wrench or socket to get that tightened down. Don't have to over tighten them, just a little bit of torque there will be fine. Now we're going to be mounting ours right here on the back side of our hitch. So we'll take our 2 heavy duty zip ties, those are going to slide right through our bracket. I'm going to bring those up and around our hitch. Now we'll just make sure we've got those nice and tight, then we can trim off the excess. Now you want to use a good sharp knife or tubing cutter part number F9009. You want a really nice flush 90-degree cut on the end of our hose. Then we're going to route it up toward our airbag. We'll just go over the frame here. The big thing you want to remember is not to drag this over any sharp edges or anything that might scratch it. If you have scratches, it's really hard to get it to seal up. We're going to bring that right up to the elbow fitting on our airbag. When you initially place it in, it's going to go in about 1/4 of an inch, but you need to push it further than that, and you'll feel a second stop point there. Once you've got to that second stop, you should be able to pull on that airline without it moving. We're coming back. Top of the frame rail is your spare tire. If you removed it, it sits right up against here, so you don't want to secure anything to that. One little loop in it in case we ever need to make any changes or modifications to the kit. Make another nice flush cut there. And then that'll go right into our inflation valve for the driver's side. Zip tie that up and out of the way. Now that we've got our airline ran to our driver's side airbag, we just want to go from our fitting over to our passenger side airbag, following the same process that we used here. Now for our leak test, we're just going to spray our Schrader valves here. You just use soapy water. We're going to spray the connections on the back side there, and also add our airbags. Then we'll give that just a few minutes to sit. We'll come back and check and make sure we don't have any expanding bubbles. This is kind of what you're looking for. You'll see we've got the smaller bubbles there that were created just from the spray bottle, but none of them are getting larger, none of them are expanding. It's going to mean we don't have any leaks here. Let's check our Schrader valves, check the top of the airbags, and as long as that's consistent, we're done with our installation. Now with no leaks detected, you want to put your tires back on if you decided to remove them, and that'll complete our installation of the Firestone Ride-Rite air helper springs for the rear axle, part number F2600, on our 2017 Ford F250.